All right, just getting things set up. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Kirsten, and together with my sister Lynn, we created the Anti-Racist Table as a multidimensional platform as a way to help people bring anti-racism into life as a daily practice. And we do this in large part with our free, long-form anti-racist education 30-day challenge, which we recently upgraded our platform. You can sign up for free and follow along this curated material at your own pace. You can do it by yourself. You can do it with a group of people. It's engaging. It includes reading, video, podcast, art, music, and will take you through important history and help you build empathy, help you figure out what it means to be an ally and what anti-racism looks like for you as a daily practice in your own life. And with that, today we are very excited to have you all here. Thank you for joining us. Our community is strong and has been growing since we launched this summer. And as we're working together as allies and partners, as we try to be the change that we need to make this world better and to center love over hate and inclusion over division, to build bridges and to take down walls and barriers, we need support and we need tools and community to do that work together. And so today we thank you for being here to continue bringing anti-racism and doing this critical work as we try to transform through love and understanding. This work is messy, it's painful, it's hard, but that's why we're having Justin here today to talk to us about learning and growing and healing and how we can do this work together and take care of ourselves. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn, who's going to do our land acknowledgement.
Yes, thanks everyone for being here. I'd like to share a land acknowledgement that's inspired by Ruth King, who's an African-American mindfulness practitioner. I'd like to call on my ancestors to stand with me as I acknowledge the native custodians of this land in this region, Washington, D.C., and Silver Spring, Maryland. That is the Anacostan land and the Piscataway people. Those people that are named, unnamed, known, unknown, past and present. We honor all traditions and traditional custodians of this region. And we recognize our continued connection with this land, with this water, and with this community. We pay respect to the earth, whose generous resources sustain us every day. We pay respect to the enslaved African people of this land who were brought, held, and sold here, and all of their descendants, and all of the people throughout the world that are living in captivity. We pay respect to their spiritual labor, and we pay respect to our ancestors whose unwise relationship to race and racism we have inherited. We pay respect to our teachers and elders, past, present, and emerging, and to all of the young people today who are teaching us. We honor this gathering, everyone here, and our special guest, Justin Michael Williams, for taking the time and energy to be with us. May we recognize that we all share an aspiration to be free in heart, mind, and body. Ashe. Here ends our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Lynn. And with that, I have the distinct honor of introducing our guest, Justin Michael Williams. From growing up with gunshot holes outside of his bedroom window to sharing the stage with Marianne Williamson and Deepak Chopra, Justin knows the power of healing to overcome. This dynamic millennial who grew up marginalized in almost every way teaches meditation as a means of self-empowerment to those who need it most. But he's not your grandma's guru. In breaking the meditation mold, he shows others how to break free from the past and take action to create a new future. He is an author, transformational transformational speaker and top 20 recording artist who has been featured by the Wall Street Journal. Today I can't talk apparently, Grammy.com, Billboard.com, The Root, The Advocate, Yoga Journal, and South by Southwest. With his groundbreaking book, Stay Woke, and over a decade of teaching experience, Justin has become a pioneering voice for diversity and inclusion in wellness. You can learn more about him at www.justinmichaelwilliams.com. And with that, there you go. Thank you so much. Welcome, Justin.
Hey, 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 everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. Thank you, Kirsten and Lynn. I did that last time. I was like, I'm not going to say Kristen. I'm going to say Kirsten, and there it went. So Kirsten and Lynn, hello.
Yes,
hello,
welcome.
everybody. Hi, Anne and Paula and Cara. Amazing, everybody. So with that beautiful introduction, thank you, Kirsten. My name is Justin Michael Williams, and we're here today to have a bit of a dynamic conversation about reclaiming the power of our voice in some big ways. And here's my name and my Instagram, because people always ask me and I forget to say it, so I put it right there. It's We Just Will. And, you know, as we get into this conversation today, one of the things that I want to make sure that we name and know is that this is not a TV show, right? Like, I'm here live with you, which is one of these beautiful things about it being on Zoom and us being here and actually creating a container together. So one of the things that I want us to do is anytime you hear me or anybody else here say something or type something that makes you want to say like, yes, or ashe, or amen, or like, put your hands up, yeah, girl, whatever it is, just type a bunch of ones into the chat box like this. And then that's how we will kind of start to exchange energy. And if you hear me say a quote or someone say a quote that you like, that you want to try to remember, it actually makes it 40% more likely that you'll remember something if you write it down. So we can just type in quotes and we'll have this thing going around, and you can throw questions in, and we're going to make this interactive. So this would be the moment where if I was in person, I would say, anti-racist table family, make some noise. And you're going to put all your ones into the chat box so that I can see them. Then I make sure that it's working. There we go. There we go. There we go. It's cheesy, but it feels good, right? Doesn't it? You can feel the energy moving when you see everybody do that. So thank you, Jody and Lynn and Deb and Wendy, Latita, everybody, Gina, amazing. I see I have a whole Williams family here too. Amazing. iPad too. So it's really just a beautiful thing to be here and have this conversation with you. And I want to talk about, in the beginning, before we even start, the power to change. And it's really interesting because people always look at me and they'll often ask me like, Justin, how are you, like, given everything's going on in the world, how are you the most optimistic queer Black man like I've ever seen? Like, why do you feel like things can actually change? Why do you feel like that we can really make a difference given what we're seeing in the media and given what's happening? And the reason why is because I've seen the change actually happen literally in my own family, in my own bloodline, and in my own life. So here's little Justin. I don't know if I look the same. There's little Justin. And, you know, I grew up in a biracial family. So I want you to follow this narrative, okay? On the left is my mom. On the right is my dad. My dad's African-American. My mom is Persian, Italian, and Middle Eastern, but she was adopted when she was 2 days old into a Sicilian Catholic Italian family. So my family that I grew up with, here they are. This is my mom's side of the family, literally came on a boat from Sicily to the United States. This is the family that raised me, literally. And what happened in this family was something that is nothing short of a miracle, but is also something that I think we've all seen in our own lives in many, many ways. So this same Sicilian family that you're seeing here, when my mom decided that she was going to marry my dad, a Black man, this family, who would have never called themselves racist, who had many friends of many different colors, who came from their own version of being marginalized at the time. At that time, you know, Italians weren't even considered white when they first came here. You know, white is this thing that is changed many times over the years. So here they are, you know, they're kind of assimilating into whiteness. And my mom decides she's going to marry this Black man. And so after a Catholic Sunday dinner, this family had a conversation and they said, if Barbara, who's my mom, decides to marry Terrence, my dad, we're going to disown her and we're never speaking to her again. And so they had, mind you, this is after church. Hello, you know? And so they have this conversation and they tell my mom, and my mom says, huh, I'm doing it anyways. So she leaves. She literally was living at home. She goes to move in with my dad's family. And this is my mom at her wedding, that my dad's grandpa's walking my mom down the aisle. No one from my mom's family came to her wedding. My dad's family paid for my mom and their wedding altogether. But then what happened next was where the magic happened. So this family, my mom gets married, a couple of weeks go by. They go have church and they have their, their Sunday dinners. And my grandfather, my white grandfather, he says, this is ridiculous, you guys. We thought that she was gonna not do it. Like, how are we literally haven't gone to her wedding? Like, this is crazy. We're gonna welcome her back. Who's with me? And it split this family in two. 4 of them said, we're coming with you. And the other 4 said, if you go, we'll never speak to you again. And I want to tell you the 2 roads that this created in our family. So one road was a road to healing. Another road was a road to incredible disintegration, and disintegration to the point that every single person except for my grandmother is the youngest one in the front there with the brown jacket. She was fly back then, in her little ways. So my grandmother, every single other person in this picture has passed away. The 4 and the 4 didn't go to each other's funerals when they died. That's the level, okay? That was happening in this way. And anybody who knows Italians know they know how to hold a good grudge, okay? And so the thing that happened here, and I say that jokingly, but just my family at least, but the other side of the family, this incredible magic happened. And I say magic because what it really takes was intimacy, connection, vulnerability, willingness to show up, get it wrong, and do it anyways, all in the name of love. So check out my family. Hold on, here it comes. This is my family. So my grandfather came back, the family came back. They had a second ceremony for my mom and my dad. Over time, obviously there was a lot of ripples and hiccups, but in the top left, you're seeing that's little baby me at a wedding that my mom was in with my grandma and grandpa. In the center, that's my grandpa and my cousins and I. So you can see the diversity and the blend of this family. On the right, one of my favorite pictures is my dad and my grandmother dancing together. They became great friends. And on the bottom is my Uncle Peter, he was one of the main ones who was against it, who switched over. Him and my grandmother became great friends. And my Uncle Peter ended up being the one who helped put me through college. And he's like a father to me, literally. And, my parents divorced, but there was still this incredible great love throughout the entire family, even though my parents weren't together, because of the intimacy and the connection that they went into. And I could have never imagined, that from all of this context, that this little boy grew up in a situation that actually gave me a great privilege, a privilege that I've gone on to write about in my music. So this is my album that came out a few years ago, Metamorphosis. I screamed like a little girl, y'all. It was, my album charted in the top 20 of iTunes. So it was Taylor Swift, Britney Spears, and then me. And my life changed pretty dramatically after that. And then to go on and talk about how this is that we come together in my book, Stay Woke, a meditation guide for the rest of us. And this book is the first ever mindfulness and meditation book that intersects social and environmental justice. How do we take these mindfulness and meditation practices and just not be sitting here woo-woo in our heads, but actually take them into our lives and make a big impact? And the reason why I share that with you right now is because I never ever could have known in that moment that this little boy growing up in this environment could give me a privilege that I didn't even know was a privilege at the time. So in my own house, once my parents divorced, I was the only Black man in my house. I was the only Black man, other than my sister, the only Black person around most of the time. And then I would go to my dad's and then it would be the opposite, right? So I constantly spent my life being in these two kind of poles, which seem like poles to us now, but didn't feel like that when I was younger. The second privilege that I had, that again, as a kid, didn't know this, I grew up in a super marginalized community. So I grew up in a town called Pittsburgh, California. Most people don't even know there's a Pittsburgh, California. It's east of Oakland. And literally, like, Kirsten said in the beginning, in a home with gunshot holes on the outside of my house. The benefit of Pittsburgh was once the 12th most diverse city in California. And so growing up, like one of my best friends was Vietnamese. There were white people in the Black Student Union, was not weird at our school at all. I was the secretary of the Filipino American Club. I'm not Filipino. I just wanted to learn how to do the nickeling from everybody. So I was in the multicultural with them. It was normal. We had Jewish friends and we celebrated everyone's holidays and everybody was in everyone's quinceañeras and cotillions and had this amazing diversity to the point where up until I was 16 and left my hometown for the first time, I actually genuinely thought racism didn't exist. Like I really did. I thought that's some old thing, this crazy thing, what is it? And then I think each of us have a moment that kind of wakes us up to what's happening in the world in reality, because obviously racism and race is not a concept that we're born with. We know this. You all know this from the work that you've done together. And so I want you to think about just a moment here, and you can type anything into the chat box, maybe close your eyes for a moment and just see if you can listen inward, not into your mind, but into your heart. When was the first time in your own life that you can remember racism becoming a thing, when you knew it was real in your own life? First time you can remember. And whenever you come up with what it is, and it doesn't have to be the ultimate first time, you don't get a prize or a wrong answer, just type in whatever it is into the chat box if you're willing, so we can see some of the stories come through. Just a brief moment of what was the first time that you knew there was a thing called racism. And for me, I had always heard about it, but I had always thought it was this thing of the past. And then I'll never forget when I was leaving to college, I went to UCLA. My dad said this one thing to me that I, at that time, couldn't have even imagined was true. But I'm leaving, and these are my dad's last words to me as I'm like getting ready to drive off to college and he's at home. He says, "Son, I need you to know something. And I've been really not wanting to tell this to you." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "The world isn't like how you've grown up. And I need you to know when you go to UCLA with all these white people that you are not one of these white boys. And if the police pull you over, I don't care what your GPA is, because I was the top of the class. I don't care what you're wearing. I don't care how you talk. They're just going to think you're another nigga." That's what my dad said to me. And I looked at him like, kind of mad. Like, this is what you're saying to me as I'm going off to college, and had this feeling of like, Dad, that's a thing of the past. And then obviously I get to LA and I see the world in a whole new way, right? And things happen. I got handcuffed on the side of the police car with a gun drawn for supposedly running a stop sign, and all kinds of different things happening. And we all have our first experiences, like Anne in 1954, and Lynn when you were 9, and Melinda seeing the shacks in Charleston and elementary school, and Nicole when you were 7, 4th grade. So when we all have these experiences when we had to wake up to this thing that just made no sense, right? It just made no sense. And for most of us, the first time I did this exercise of when was the first time you knew of a thing called race was with Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. Many of you probably know her, very incredible leader. And she asked that question. And for so many of us, there's just great confusion because it doesn't make sense. But even in the nonsensicalness of it, I'm saying we as an infinity symbol, collectively, ancestors and all the way around, created this thing. We created racism. Literally, like if anybody's read Caste, for example, from Isabel Wilkerson, there was no such thing as black and white before the Americas. Didn't exist. The names black and white didn't exist. She said she went to Africa and they said, we don't have black people in Africa. You're only black when you get to the United States or the UK, right? If you're in Europe, they don't call each other white. They're like, you're French and you're this and you're that, right? You're only white when you come over here. So if we created this thing, we are the ones who are going to be here to end it. And one of my deepest beliefs, I wrote an article that I'm going to put the link in the chat box to. It's endingracismtogether.com. I wrote an article that got a lot of attention called How to End Racism in One Generation. And it's interesting because one of the things that I keep seeing over and over in a lot of the anti-racist work that I'm doing is this notion that racism can never end. It will never end, right? And we read it in a lot of the books. It's a lifelong fight that we're going to be doing forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and it's never going to end. If that's the perspective that we're coming from, of course, it's never ending. But why? It was a question that I was reading when I was asking, why is this the perspective that we're coming from? In a world where we've done things that seem impossible, putting a man on the moon, all the things that we've done, you know, curing in a way, not curing, but rather, you know, controlling or getting control over things like HIV, you know, what we're seeing right now in the world with Corona, we've done incredible things. Why is it that racism is a thing that can supposedly never end? So this is our responsibility now to choose a pathway that is going to help us not just talk about race, not just talk about racism, not just talk about change. There are lots of conversations about change, very few conversations that actually change something. And what I'm interested in is conversations that change something. You could read about swimming as much as you want. You won't learn how to swim until you jump in the pool. So the creations and the context and everything that I'm here to create with you all, and hopefully today I'm able to do that successfully with you, is to not just talk about these things, but to help us do something that actually helps us impact it and change it in a meaningful way. So are you with me? I see some ones in here. Amazing. So one of the things that really, if you take anything from me today, my hope is that you take this that I'm about to put up on the screen right now. In my book and in a lot of my work, I talk about the difference between fear and faith. I want everybody to type that in for me really quick. Fear and faith. Just type that into the chat box. Fear and faith, fear and faith, fear and faith, because this is important. So I'm not talking about particularly religious faith. I'm talking about the broader context of faith, which can include religion, but that means a complete belief in something or someone. Complete belief in something. So just like you could have faith in your kids or faith in your husband or faith in, you know, whatever it is. Fear and faith, they are the exact same thing. They're the same thing. And when I say that, most people look at me and they say, okay, that sounds nice. It sounds like a good Instagram quote, but like, why? And the reason why fear and faith are the same thing is because both fear and faith run on the same underlining tenet. Both fear and faith require you to believe in something that you can't see and that hasn't happened yet. That's it. That's literally it. Both fear and faith require you to believe in something that you can't see and that hasn't happened yet. And so what are we choosing to believe? When we choose fear, we're choosing to believe in our demise. We're choosing to let the media choose for us. We're choosing to believe in hopelessness. When we choose faith, we're choosing to believe in circumstances where our possibilities are not limited by those circumstances. We choose to believe in hope. We choose to believe in love. And then ultimately, based upon those beliefs, we create what? Our reality together. We create our actions. And so on this belief system that we have to really constantly, rigorously ask ourselves, what am I choosing? What am I choosing? In this moment, what am I choosing? And this is big work for us because there's so much shit that makes us want to choose fear constantly. It's ingrained inside of us, you know, and it's getting fed to us every single day. And I'm not saying that we ignore the things that are going on. I'm not saying we spiritually bypass those things, but I'm saying in the faith of all the great testing, we choose faith inside of that. We maximize our faith inside of the reality of the circumstances. And so as we go on this journey together, I think about all of my work, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in a program that I do called the Liberation Experience, that there's this infinity symbol that I keep mentioning, okay? And the infinity symbol for me represents, yes, the past and the present and right now and the future. But the truth is, what we have the opportunity to do right now as a community, as a generation, we have the opportunity to do something that no community has had the opportunity to do before. No generation has. If you ask anybody who was alive and doing work during the civil rights era, they will say, the classical civil rights era, they will say that this doesn't feel anything like that. It's something totally different. And so our generation has the opportunity to do some deep work. We have the opportunity to not just talk about racism, to end it. We have the opportunity for the first time with New York Times best-selling books and classes and courses and programs to come together and have this conversation, use our voices, and get into the mess. That's what we're here to do, to get into the mess and figure it out, right? Because no one's ever done this in this way before. So this is an amazing opportunity. And this is why I talk so much about mindfulness. People ask, what is mindfulness, or what is meditation, or what does any of this have have to do with anything? And it has to do with a lot, because what mindfulness actually gives us the opportunity to do, you can go into all the scientific benefits, and for people to know, I'm a total woo-woo person, but I'm also a total neuroscience geek. I study a lot of science. I weave it into everything I do. I think psychoeducation is super important. And one of the things that we know is that worrying and meditation are literally the same thing in your brain. When you worry, what do? When they scan our brains, they can see this happening. When you worry, what do? You come back to some centering negative thought over and over and over and over. When you meditate, what are you asked to do? To come back to some centering intention over and over and over and over. But the outcomes of those two things are very different, right? When we're worrying, we're choosing fear. When we're meditating, we're taking our power back and choosing faith. And so every time we sit down to practice, we get a chance to come home to ourselves. We get a chance to remember what we believe in. We get a chance to choose faith over fear. We get a chance to give our souls, that higher version of ourselves, whatever name you call it by, an opportunity to speak to us. Because if we don't get an opportunity for our inner voice to speak to us, then the only voice that we can listen to is a voice outside of ourselves. And the voice, you already know what the voices outside of ourselves are saying, right? So this is our opportunity. When we practice mindfulness, it gives us opportunity to again and again, in the face of all this testing, to choose faith, to give our souls an opportunity to help us remember who we are, remember what we believe in, remember what's important to us, remember what we stand for, but only so that we can take action. If all we're doing, and this is why the mindfulness and meditation community gets such a bad rap, if all we're doing is love and light, shanti, shanti, ain't working, okay? Great. Let us please continue, right? Let us continue to do that. I send love and light every day. We do all the Om Namahas. We do all the things, right? If that's all you're doing, it's literally just making the whole practice about you. And that's one of the shadows of the human potential or personal growth world. Is how did it start? We know a lot of white people who brought these spiritual teachings west during the 60s, decided to kind of disappear to spiritual retreat centers and say, as long as my thoughts are fine, as long as this body is fine, I could just send the world love and light and everything will be okay. Let's see how that turned out, right? So now what's happening as this world is diversifying, we're having an opportunity to go, how do these practices, let's not demonize them, but let's actually see how the human potential movement can go to its next level, 2.0, to help us take this all to the next level, to help us help one another. So in today's session, we're going to learn about some ways that we can start to find our authentic voice in the movement for equality. And our journey together is going to look like some elements of finding our voice, We're going to jump next into a conversation that I call the big P and how it impacts all of our lives. And then we're going to go into the 7 hidden forms of fear and how to overcome these hidden forms of fear. And the reason for this is because anytime we're getting ready to share our voice, we are for sure, especially if you're leaning into something new, going to get hit with some form of fear. And it usually comes disguised, okay? And I have a special surprise for you at the end that Lynn and Kirsten know all about. And I'm going to do, and also I've almost left this one off here. I'm going to do a little song for you all at the end if we have time. Okay. So it'll be really fun. And as a part of the surprise, you know, I mentioned the liberation experience, and it's something that I'll talk to you about at the end. And what I'm going to do here in this time is I'm going to give you as much as I can in this limited amount of time together we have here. We're going to be together for just about another hour. And at the end, for those of you who want to take it further with additional tools or training or support, Kirsten, Lynn, and I have created something really special for you. So please stick around until the end if you can. Great. Y'all ready? Can I see some ones in the air? Great. I can see your hands up too. I love when I actually see you guys in the window doing it too. It's great. I see you, Jody and Anna and everybody. Agnes, amazing. Keisha, Laura. Oh, it's so beautiful to be here together. Amazing. All right. The big P. What do you think it is? Please keep it PG. One time somebody said something in a chat box and I couldn't even teach. What do we think the big P is? Power, patriarchy, close. Promise, patience. This one, Paula, you're close. It has to, Paula and Lynn, it has to do with power. Purpose. These are all great P words. Persistence, people. All right, I'm going to give it to you. Privilege. So I know some of you, I love the face you just made, CMS. That was great. It's like, so Kelly pie, I wish, right? So that's good. As long as it's chocolate or Oreo. So privilege. I know when I talk about privilege, right? Like this is one of those words that I think now a lot of us are kind of like, oh God, you know, like here's this word again, you know, it's just getting so thrown around, like, you know, grass-fed, vegan, privilege, you know, it's like just thrown around all over the place now. And people are just using it without really having a deep context or understanding of what it means. But I want to talk to you about privilege in a way that's a little bit different than you might expect, specifically because oftentimes right now when we hear the word privilege, we instantly go into the concept of white privilege versus understanding other kinds of privilege. And if we don't understand the concept of privilege in a bigger way, which I know you all have done some work on, then we miss the opportunity to use our voices in the maximum way that we actually have the capability to do. So I'm going to put this little scale on the screen right now here. And I want you to type in with no shame, okay? No shame, no blame, where it is that you imagine you fall on this scale. On the left says not privileged at all, moving to barely privileged, privileged is at the center, significantly privileged, and then very privileged is on the right. Where do you think you land here? Very, significantly, very, 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 great, barely, very, beautiful. All right. So I love this definition of privilege. And actually, let me say one thing. One of the tenets with and underneath and inside of all of my work, and this is, again, a lot of the studies. So a lot of the anti-racist work that is happening right now, with great gratitude and reverence for the work itself, a lot of the work is rooted in a lot of unprocessed shame, blame, and anger. Not all of it, a lot of it. And I'm not saying that those emotions aren't rightfully felt, but what I know from being somebody who for the last over a decade has like dedicated my life to the field of transformation and personal transformation and understanding the mind and psychology and all of this is understanding that there are decades and decades and decades of study that show that if you use shame, guilt, and blame, it literally hijacks your nervous system, hijacks your brain, and shuts down the centers of the brain that promote learning, change, and growth. Science you could take every opinion out of that. It is studied and repeated multiple times. And so in my work, because of knowing that, it is like a tenet that there is no shame, there's no blame, we're allowed to make mistakes. We have to come forward at each other in a way of compassion, and not just like compassion, I love everybody, but sometimes fierce compassion. And the reason why this is so important is because people literally cannot learn or change when shame and blame is in the field. And so as much as sometimes in our community, we want to be heard and we want to speak our truth and we want to call people out and we want to say all the things that we want to say, the question that I constantly ask myself, and this goes to the fear of faith conversation, and what are you choosing, is what you're doing helpful? Is it making a difference? Or do you just want to be heard? And if you just want to be heard, fine. But for me, I'm here for the change, right? I'm here for the change. And sometimes we make mistakes. But this is a really important thing that I just want to set into the space that I didn't say in the beginning for this time that we're going to have together here, because we might get into a couple of things that are a little uncomfortable, and know that it's all held in a wide open, massive space of love, all of it, okay? Because we're all here to grow. And I know that. I know that you're all here to grow and change. So I love this quote from Janaea Future Khan. Privilege isn't about what you've gone through. It's about what you haven't had to go through. This quote literally changed my understanding of privilege forever. Because the first thing that anybody says when you call them privileged is, well, I'm gay. Well, I'm Jewish. Well, my family went through the Holocaust. Well, my family this. Well, I'm a woman. Well, I'm this. And then we get this defensiveness, right? That shows up, of course, because there's the shame and blame coming in your face to just name that, like, hey, I've had to work for my shit too. Don't call me privileged. But when we flip this perspective completely, it's not about what you've gone through. No one's denying what you've gone through or trying to compare your hardships. It's about what you haven't had to go through. Now we open the space for compassion, to just really think about, wow, what is it that these people or this person has had to deal with in their life? And this quote from Darnell Moore, colleague and incredible author, brother of mine, he says, if we can only name the feet that are situated on our necks. Contextually, he wrote this in his book in 2017, before George Floyd. So just feel that. If we can only name the feet that are situated on our necks, but fail to name and recognize the ways our feet are situated on someone else's neck, we will never, ever be free. And so this begs us to question, who are we being in the secret spaces of our lives? This is where, for those of us who are good and wanting to do good in the world and wanting to create change and doing our anti-racist work, this is the area where we have our foot on the gas and on the brake at the same time, where we're wanting to make change, but we're actually have our feet on somebody's neck at the same time. And again, it's with great compassion, because we learn and then we say, all right, show me how I can be better. Show me how I can do different. And not just show me to the person who you're doing harm to, even though sometimes that could be appropriate, but in most cases, it's show me from a bigger space and allow me to learn so that I can do better. And so a piece of this context, I'll tell you a quick story I wasn't planning to tell. We all have this, right? So I'll tell you the one that happened to me last year during COVID. So when I was growing up, my uncle, my white uncle, he was the first person in our family, like he went to college and, you know, the whole thing, and became a pharmacist. And he was the first person in our family that ever had a cleaning lady. And so he got like a cleaning service. And my uncle's cleaning service used to go to his house when he wasn't home. It was like a service, not just a person. And he never met them, never, ever, ever met the people. They would go when he was at work every time. And when he came, because in the beginning he had a consultation and they said, you know, it'll be a new person sometimes. And if you like it, then we'll keep that same person, but you may never meet them. So every time he would come home, he would text us or call and say, Lupe came. Lupe came. And we were so excited because Lupe came to clean my uncle's house. He doesn't know if her name was Lupe, doesn't know her ethnicity, doesn't know anything, but he called her Lupe. You see the stereotypes here, right? So the discrimination happening. So I grew up with this Lupe joke with my uncle, right? Nothing that's ever public, kind of this inside joke in our family. Maybe 5 people know about it, no big deal. no big deal. Fast forward to last year during COVID. I was at my friend Christy's house, okay? Mind you, I'm in the middle of teaching this work, speaking about it all over the place, writing a book about it. I walk into my friend Christy's house and her place was a mess. And I said, girl, you need to call Lupe. And I almost fell out of my skin because it was that quick. And I think, and I'm sure I've said it many other times, but it was something about the moment that we were in. It was just after George Floyd. I was speaking and teaching about privilege. I was talking about having feet on people's necks. And here I was telling her to call Lupe, right? And so in that moment, I have two choices, right? What I can do is, oh my God, I'm so bad. The shame and the blame and the whole thing that we end up doing to oppress ourselves, which really is just more of a part of making it all about you, continuing to make it all about you. But what we also have the opportunity to go, okay, which is what I did. I turned to Christy and I said, I'm so sorry that I said that. And she didn't even know why. She said, what are you talking about? And so I explained the story to her. And I said, I am going to make a declaration right now that I will never, ever in my life say that again. I will never say that again. And if for some weird reason it comes out, I'm going to explain why and make sure that everybody around me knows that that's not okay. Because here I am supposed to be a person who's a leader in this movement. How can I be saying something like this? And so in that moment, there's the learning, there's the undoing, there's all the ways that we get to change. So you can look at the places in your own life where this shows up. Okay. So here's where and I wasn't even planning to share that story, but it feels appropriate to know that we're all working through this, right? All of us are working through this. First generation with an opportunity to do this work. So here's the deal. Most of us are privileged, okay? And we're gonna do a little test that will tell you how much. And I created something in my book, Stay Woke, called the Privilege Test. That's an adaptation of this amazing video that I saw that many of you might have seen. And I'm going to play the video for you right now. It's a video from BuzzFeed called What is Privilege? And then we're going to do our own version of it just afterwards. Enjoy.
Some people are born into families where they have to walk miles just to get water. All I have to do is turn on a faucet. That's privilege.
Ooh, I'm glad I asked. Something in me was like, I don't think they can hear this. Okay, I don't know what happened. Hold on a second.
It started and then it cut off.
Thank you. Hold on, let me see if I just messed that up. Share sound. Ba, ba, ba. All right. Tell me if you can hear it now.
Some people are born into families where they have to walk miles just to get water. All I have to do is turn on a faucet. That's privilege.
You can still hear it, right?
If you have ever tried to change your speech, if you were embarrassed about your clothes or house, if you would never think twice about calling the police when trouble occurs.
I think privilege is when some people have some things and other people don't have things.
I feel privilege is something that you don't even really have control over.
I think it'd be silly for me to say I don't have a fair amount of privilege, considering like the country I live in and the job I get to do and the college I was allowed to go to.
I suppose being a white male will help me end up somewhere towards the front, but I'll take a few steps back from being gay.
I don't think I'll make it to the front. I think I'll maybe be in the middle. That's just the gut feeling I have.
If your parents work nights and weekends to support your family, take one step back. If you can show affection for your romantic partner in public without fear of ridicule or violence, take one step forward. If you were embarrassed about your clothes or house while growing up, take one step back. If you have ever been diagnosed as having a physical or mental illness or disability, take one step back. If you've ever been bullied or made fun of based on something you can't change, take one step back. If you get time off for your religious holidays, take one step forward. If you came from a supportive family environment, if you can see a doctor whenever you feel the need, if you are able to move through the world without fear of sexual assault, if you took out loans for your education, if there were more than 50 books in your house growing up. So these are your final positions.
I think it felt kind of strange for everyone.
It's a hard thing to discuss or even reflect on.
It was very awkward. I think when you can represent it so visually like this and so immediately, it definitely takes on a new form.
I think we were like all joking around in the beginning. It was pretty lighthearted, and as soon as the questions started coming in, the mood shifted immediately, and we all it was just silent.
Just looking back and seeing like a bunch of people behind you is not a good feeling.
It's like weird how you want to like hold on to explaining a certain privilege, like, oh, but that's not actually me, because like I had to work really hard for that. So it's weird to like take a step forward when you feel like you're taking a step forward with someone else, but you wear a lot of the baggage of like how those things were hard.
It was like more emotional than I thought it would be.
It reminded me of when they talk about slavery in high school and you feel like angry for a few days, but then you just realize like, this is how it is.
For me, it was kind of frustrating almost to look back and see how much further some people were behind me, and realizing that, you know, a lot of that stuff, no amount of hard work or even legislation can make up that gap.
It's interesting being an Asian American because you're not really sure where you fall on the spectrum of privilege.
I know that for me, one of the reasons I ended up so far back was that there are questions around safety as an African American, as a woman, as a gay woman. There are just so many different ways that I don't feel safe.
I feel like I just learned to be grateful for what you have. You know, we're in such a huge society where it's always complaining about what you don't have.
It just shows you that for some families, like each family, you're meant to do better. My grandparents did good, my parents did good, and I'll do even better.
I do think if you're not like aware of privilege, you should do this exercise, but it's more complicated.
So just take a moment and place your hands over your heart, and you can close your eyes if it feels comfortable to you, keep them open, and just see if you can presence whatever that brought up for you. Just whatever it is, let it expand inside of you a little bit more without needing to push it down, letting it be what it is, letting it flow and move. It's another thing that mindfulness teaches us to do, is to allow the flow of our emotions so it doesn't have to erupt in places it doesn't belong. With kindness and placing our attention with compassion and kindness. And then take a breath in and a breath out. And feel free to type in whatever that brought up for you into the chat. And as you do that, I'm going to set us up to do a little version of the privilege test ourselves. So, and I see you, Anne, sadness, Lynn, sadness. A lot of us feel that when we see that, right? It's very deep. And anger, beautiful. So let those things come. They're not bad. Nothing wrong with them. The notion of awareness and trying to think about moving away from my shame and blame into action. Yep. Beautiful. So let's do this together. You're going to need either a piece of paper or just a notepad on your phone or on your laptop. My recommendation for you, after having done this with literally tens of thousands of people, is do not do it in your calculator, because if you just push one wrong button, it's over and you're going to be lost. So write it down, and I'll give you a second to add it all up later. Okay. So piece of paper or something. And what's going to do is I'm going to say a phrase. And if the phrase applies to you, you'll put a +1 for a step forward, a -1 for a step back, and 0 for no movement, okay? So your options for each one will either be a step forward or 0, or a step back or 0. And so you'll see how this works as we go through it. I'll go through the first couple a little slowly. here we go. If your parents or guardians worked nights and weekends to support your household, take one step back. So for this one, you're either putting a 0. If your parents didn't work nights and weekends, you take a 0, so you don't move. And if they did work nights and weekends, you put a -1 to take a step back. I won't go through all of them this slowly, but just to make sure everyone's clear. And the next one, if you can go shopping alone most of the time and be pretty well assured that you will not be followed or harassed, take a step forward. So the options here are 0, to say still if you think you would be followed or harassed, and a +1 if you think you would be safe most of the time. All right, let's move through it. Everyone got it, right? If you don't have it or you're confused, put something in the chat so I know. If you are cisgender, meaning that your gender identity corresponds to your birth sex, take one step forward. I'm gonna go through them a little more quickly now. If you can show affection for your romantic partner in public without fear of ridicule or violence, take one step forward. If you have ever been diagnosed as having a physical or mental illness or disability, take one step back. If the primary language spoken in your household growing up was not English, take one step back. If you have ever tried to change your speech or mannerisms to gain credibility, take one step back. If you can go anywhere in the country and easily find the kinds of hair products you need and/or cosmetics that match your skin color, take one step forward. If you can pass as heterosexual, take one step forward. If you were embarrassed about your clothes or home while growing up, take one step back. If you were rarely asked to speak for all of the people in your racial group, take one step forward. And just feel these as we're going through. We're going through them quickly on purpose, but just feel that every time that you're either forward or back or still, there's somebody else making a different movement in this group today. And just feel the energy of that as we go through holding it in your heart. It's really interesting when we take these from just facts and really make them real for us. If you can legally marry the person you love, regardless of where you live, take one step forward. When asking to talk to the person in charge, if you're pretty certain you will be facing a person of your race, take one step forward. If you or your parents have ever gone through a divorce, take one step back. If you can be late to a meeting without having lateness reflect on your race, take one step forward. If you're reasonably sure you would be hired for a job on the basis of your abilities and qualifications, take one step forward. If you would never think twice about calling the police when trouble occurs, take one step forward. If you can see a doctor whenever you feel the need, take one step forward. If you feel comfortable being emotionally expressive or open, take one step forward. If you've ever been the only person of your race, gender, socioeconomic status, or sexual orientation in a classroom or workplace setting, take one step back. If you took out loans for your education, take one step back. If you get time off for your religious holidays, take one step forward. If you need legal or medical help and you can be sure that your race will not work against you, take one step forward. If you have ever traveled outside of your home country, take one step forward. If you feel confident that your parents would be able to financially help or support you, if you were going through a serious monetary hardship, take one step forward. And if your parents have passed on, if they would have been able to while they were alive. If you have ever been bullied or made fun of because of something that you can't change, take one step back. If there were more than 50 books in your home growing up, take one step forward. If you study the culture or the history of your ancestors in elementary school, take one step forward. Elementary school. If your parents or guardians attended college, take one step forward. If you ever went on a family vacation, take one step forward. Just a few more. If one of your parents or guardians was ever laid off or unemployed, not by choice, take one step back. If you were ever uncomfortable about a joke or a statement overheard related to your race, ethnicity, gender, appearance, or sexual orientation, but felt unsafe to confront the situation, take a step back. One step back. And finally, if you have access to clean water, take one step forward. Now, before you do anything, we come back very quickly, and this is a mindfulness practice, to just put the hands over the heart. And the reason why we actually do this is we've evolved biologically to, when we have anything over our heart, to release a little oxytocin into the body, which helps us soften and opens up those compassionate centers of the brain. This is the big reason why when people pray, the hands are at the heart and all of that, because it opens up something actually in our brain to help us connect into that sense of something greater to one another. And just notice how it felt going through those. Notice if there were any surprises for you, or what came up. And if we were all standing together, where you might find yourself on this grid if we were walking in a room doing this, and where some other people might be. Great, and take a deep breath in and out. And open your eyes and tally up your scores. And when you're ready, put them into the chat box. Very excited to see what happens in this group. It's always very different depending on what kind of group I'm speaking to. And once you tally up your scores, you can put them in the chat. Shanette, 1, Anne, 20, 16, 18, 19, -7, 13, 11, 22, 21, 16, 9, 7, 14, 17, 13. Great. 1, 20. Feel the range happening here. 6. This is really, really important to see. So let's look at this as you feel those coming through. Here's our range again. I know these are a little small, so I'll read them to you. Not privileged at all is -11. Barely privileged, -5. Privileged, 0. Significantly privileged, +11. And very privileged, 22. The highest possible score in this scale is 22. The lowest possible score in this scale is -11. So any surprises for people or anything, I would love to hear if anybody wants to share anything about their experience. Maybe one person, if you'd like to share, you can unmute yourself and say anything that arose for you. Anybody? I know everybody's always nervous to do that, but I know somebody in here wants to share. I'd love to hear your voices. Oh, come on, y'all. Okay, I see you.
I'm David. I'm sorry I came late.
Yeah, go ahead.
But and I'm not good at putting things in the chat. So
wait, did I get the right name there?
Sorry?
Paul, go ahead and unmute yourself. We'll allow you. There you go. All right.
I had 18.
Hold on, how come I can't hear anything? Give me a second.
Okay.
Do you guys hear Paula?
Someone else was speaking, actually.
We hear David.
Oh, I know why. Hold on. Okay, got it. Hi.
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 One of us.
Paula, go ahead.
Go Paula and then David. Thank you.
So initially I thought that I was off the charts with privilege. I wound up with a score of 13, but I still feel like I should be off the charts, especially thinking about your initial definition of the things that I didn't have to go through, which the quiz didn't cover. So it was telling, but I'm feeling like there's a little bit of inaccuracy in the scale. Like I feel more privileged than my number says I am.
Yeah, this is good. And this is a good thing. Thank you, Paula, to remember. This is not like the ultimate privilege test of all time, right? This is more of an exercise to just help us see. And I think one of the things that's going to be important for you, Paula, because I noticed this with a lot of people, especially those of us who've been doing anti-racist work and we've been reading about it, we've been talking about it. When we do this and we find ourselves lower on this scale than we think, then we're not actually taking a moment to feel, which is important. Wow, I've been through a few things, because there are people on this scale who are 22, and again, it's not saying you aren't privileged. We're all privileged in some way. That's what this scale really is telling us, right? And there's many more questions that could have been added here, but this test helps us kind of see how relative this is, and really the purpose of it not being to compare people or say you're a lot privileged or you're a little privileged, to show that we all have an opportunity to show up in our way to make a difference in the movement and in this impact from our place. And if you don't honor the ways in which you may have not been privileged, then you might miss the opportunity to connect with some people who have the same connection point. Right? If you're just like, I'm super privileged and I don't want to virtue signal. I don't want to talk about my white this and that. So I'm just not going to say any of the things that I've ever done that have ever happened to me. Then you actually miss the connection point. We miss the connection point. So both and Paula, you're privileged and you've been through some stuff too. Cool. How's that feel? Yeah. All right. David, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I was 18 on the plus.
Yeah.
So that's pretty up there.
Pretty up there.
And the negatives were because I'm gay. And the minute that anything related to gender came up, this pit in my stomach. And I'm 73 years old, I've been gay for a long time. And I'm so surprised that, well, not totally surprised, but yeah. It's still there. Things don't go away.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing in this way, David. I love that perspective of things don't go away. And it's interesting because the reality of what it is doesn't change, but the meaning that we derive from it does, right? And that's what changes. And I think that's so beautiful when you look at a lot of the education around like trauma, for example. Our trauma and like our story doesn't actually define us. It's the meaning that we create from the trauma that does define us. At the end of the day, it's the story and the narrative that we place on top of what the trauma is and how we heal from that actually starts to define who we make ourselves to be in our lives. So we've all gone through a collective trauma here. And as a fellow gay man, there is a big trauma there too. So I thank you, David, for sharing. Anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, I think when somebody usually wants to talk when they had a super low score. So if there's one of you, I would love to hear from you. And in the meantime, I will say that, one of the things that often happens is when we do this test, we often say, oh my gosh, like we look at where the defense system starts to automatically go in place, right? Well, why didn't he put in a question about this? Well, there's no question about that. Well, the scale is not really that accurate, right? Like there's all these things that we immediately go into. Fine, but just notice that, this is the mindful part, notice that system turning on. And then I want you to imagine and understand compassionately how somebody who's never been to therapy, never done mindfulness work, never done anti-racist work, never read into this, why they have walls go up when somebody starts to have a conversation with them like this. If you guys are here at the anti-racist table, there couldn't be a more prime group. If we still have little walls going, whoop, then we can try to have a little bit of an understanding of everybody else, right? So this is really special. Thank you. Who else wants to share? I just heard somebody unmute themselves.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep. Who is it?
My name is Simone.
Hi, Simone.
I'm very grateful for this exercise, especially because, you know, the word privilege has come up so many times, and I kind of tone it down, and like I tone the volume down, because I'm like, well, I'm not privileged like that, so I don't have to listen so much.
Yeah.
But, you know, because I'm African American, I grew up actually pretty privileged. I went to an all-girls school in Georgetown, so, but there is a lot of, you know, I'm African American, so it's like, you know, I am often mindful of my space, my area. Excuse me for the background noise.
It's all
like
good.
if I'm shopping, you know, if I'm, you know, out with the kids and, you know, wanting to reprimand them, making sure that I'm, you know, not being too loud and, you know, not wanting to attract a lot of attention. So, like I said, like, I just wanted to share that I came up with 1 on the privilege scale. And it's just, you know, holding my heart, it's just like, it sinks in like, oh my gosh, this is the number. Like, you know, it's like, and I'm so glad, you know, I actually did this activity, because I think it's important to have a deeper awareness of the privilege. You know, it's like, I do know that I have a lot to be grateful for. I do know that, you know, my mother is a doctor, you know, my dad is an architect. So I'm first, you know, I went to college. So I understand these things, but then there's also these other setbacks. Like, you know, when I'm in all white spaces and having to repeat myself, you know, because I'm not being like my English isn't understandable. You know what I mean? So it's just very helpful. It's just so helpful to see it like this so clearly, and just to take, you know, a moment, you know, just to let that sink in. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you, Simone. And thank you to I think you said it was your son in the background for contributing the joy to us too. We're all here smiling. So thank you. And, you know, and I did see somebody, and I don't know if this was an accident or not, somebody, I'm not going to pronounce this name properly, Mpume, maybe, had their Zoom hand up, but I don't know if that was on purpose or an accident. If it was on purpose, feel free to unmute yourself and share with us. And, but otherwise, I'm going to pause on the sharing because I want to get through what I need to get through. And I only have about 15 more minutes. So if you have something to share, I'm going to ask you to just hang tight unless you're Mpume. And I want to respond to Simone specifically. So Simone, you said something that's really important. Here you are with a 1, right? And on this scale, a 1 is listed as privilege. And I think that will shock a lot of African-American people. So my score, just for context for everybody, is -4. And that still is in an area of privilege, you know, on this scale. And what is really important to name, especially for the people of color who are doing this work, is for some reason, the way that this has been framed, and again, I think it's because of the shame and the rage and the anger into this, is it's been framed that like white people have to do all the work, right? That like these conversations are just things, white people need to look at their privilege, white people need to look at this. Like, but no, like, yes, there's like, you know, white people started it, this, that, we can go into all the history. If we want to change this thing, we're all going to have to step up to the plate and do it together and do the work that's ours to do. It's not that the whole work is for everyone to do, but for African-American people, it's so often that we just kind of shut our eyes on this one. Privilege, nope, don't need to hear that. I'm not privileged. You know, No, don't need to hear about white supremacy. That's not me. We have a lot of, I'll say I, because I'm not speaking for everybody, a lot of white supremacy inside of me that needs to be unlocked just because my skin color is black, right? And so there is a lot of beautiful, beautiful experiences that we can step into when we start to look at the fact that we all have privilege in some way, regardless of what color our skin is. And Simone, I just want to thank you so much for sharing. And I saw Kelly, I know that I unmuted and probably wanted to share, but if it's okay, I want to move forward so I can finish up. Is that all right?
No, you go.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm going to mute you just so we don't have any audio feedback. So continuing on, this is a really powerful practice and can really give us a lot of hope, because what we have to look at is how we take this into our lives. And this goes back to what I started with. There are lots of conversations about change, but very few conversations that actually change something. And this conversation today, once we approach the privilege conversation in this way, we can see that we all have areas and places in which we can use our voice where we may not have noticed before. We have people who took steps back where we took steps forward. We have people who took steps back when we also did and who didn't move, and connections that can be made, and places that we can use our voice, and places that we can reach back, even though I don't really like that word, but reach in another direction and help pull everybody to the center into equity. And so the question becomes, how do we take this into our lives? How do we take this into our lives? And this is one of the big topics that we talk about in the liberation experience. But I want to share one nugget with you before I get into the fears that's really important to me, okay? And this is a massive thing that I think is essential as we evolve in our work. Most people have heard of calling out, but I'll just give you a quick refresher. Calling out is when somebody does something that seems wrong in public. Calling in is what we say when somebody does something wrong, but we talk to them in private. So calling out is public, calling in is private. Neither of those things work if you're not calling them forward. I don't care if you're calling out, in, sideways, upside down, whatever way you want to call it. If you're using shame and blame, it's not going to work. And this, to me, is the missing piece of the equation of what we're all wanting to learn how to do. When we want to have conversations across divides, when we hear a coworker or a family member or somebody say something that we know is out of alignment with our vision for justice, with our vision for the world, and we have that moment where we know we want to speak, but we don't know how to do it. I don't know what, that moment that we all have. I have it too. There is a method and a system that we want to use to help us learn how to call people forward. And I think what's missing in a big piece of our work right now is the vision of where we're headed, right? So there's a difference between fighting against something and moving towards something. Fighting against something just could push us all in opposite directions. We could all be fighting against racism, but moving in 1,000 different directions, and then actually becoming more disconnected from one another than we were before, because in our fighting against, we're actually pushing away left, right, up, down, in every direction without anything to actually be connected to anymore. Moving towards something, fighting for something. I even like to take the word fighting out. Moving towards something actually accomplishes the same thing that fighting against something does. It moves you away from it, but at the same time, it takes us toward a common vision and a goal. And this is what I call in all of my work, visionary activism. Visionary activism instead of reactionary activism. And it's not saying that we don't need both, but we need the visionary activism. And I think that's what's missing from our puzzle here, because we need something to rally together with and to move towards. And you can't call people forward into something if we don't know what direction we're headed in the first place. And so this is my work that I feel inspired to call into the world. There's many other people doing this work as well, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams being one of them, to saying, let's continue to do all this work, but let's not just do it to talk about racism. Let's do it to end it. Let's continue doing all the work we're doing, but let's move towards ending it, not just to continue talking in circles about it over and over and over for the rest of our lives and our kids' lives and our kids' kids' lives and then everybody's lives, until somebody finally chooses faith and says, I believe this can end. And then that ripple spreads, and that belief system is what we then create our new reality off of. You know, the science shows that we as primates, or whatever, however you want to define it, we create in-groups and out-groups. That's a part of kind of what we do socially. But the idea that in-groups and out-groups should be based on the color of someone's skin is something that I believe that we can change. That's literally what we're doing. We've created in-groups and out-groups throughout human history, but we've decided in this modern history, in the last several hundred years, to create in-groups and out-groups based on the color of what we define as black or white, which are complete assessments that make no sense. So now we have an opportunity to step in and undo it. And as we do this and we step into this work and we start calling people forward, what's going to come up first and foremost is fear. How many of y'all been scared to speak up before? I know I have. I still get scared to speak up, you know, and I teach this shit. I still get scared to speak up. It's a part of the process. And so I want to talk you through very quickly, as we have our last 10 minutes together, the 7 hidden forms of fear and how to spot them. And these hidden forms of fear, you're going to want to write these down, are going to show up in any area of your life where you're trying to step in and press into something new. But especially as we step in to sharing our voice around race, racism, equality, and ending racism. So I'll start with number 1, and you can type this in so you remember it, is real fear. Very simple, real fear, okay? And the reason I say real fear is because in the spiritual community, there's this kind of notion of saying like, fear is not real. Fear is real, right? It's there to help us. It's there to keep us safe. It's an actual thing. And in your life, there may have been a point when the fear was needed to keep you safe. But that leads into the second form of fear, echo fear. So this is what I call echo fear. And echo fear, somebody type that in. I'm going to keep a few of you responsible for typing it into the chat box for people. So echo fear, thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Kirsten, Carrie, Wendy, is when a fear that was real in the past is no longer the situation in your life, but the echoes from that fear are actually controlling your responses to your life now. So the situation's no longer here, but we're continuing to oppress ourselves because of the situation in the past. And we're applying our logic from what did protect us once into a situation that no longer needs to be that. And then we end up shutting ourselves down in many ways. Number 3, this is a big one, perfectionism. How many of y'all feel that? I see you. I know y'all even know your camera's off. You know it's serious when I start pointing at the screen. Perfectionism. Perfectionism is when we think we have to get it exactly right for us to share. We have to get it exactly right. I'm not sure, I haven't read enough. I'm finally going to say something. Once I do this, I'll finally go start that thing or volunteer here or do that. Once I finally am ready and worthy, blah, 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 perfect. And then what happens is we end up completely like sucking the joy out of whatever it is that we wanted to do because it's not perfect enough. And then guess what? We never do it. Now, the reason why I'm naming these this way is because when these show up in our lives, perfectionism, echo fears, and the rest that I'm going to share, they don't show up as, hey, you're scared. They show up as some rational reason why you shouldn't. And this is why when we can recognize these hidden forms of fear and we notice the perfectionism or the echoes coming up, then we can stop, drop, and ask ourselves, what am I afraid of? Because if you can get to that point to ask, really, what is it that you're afraid of? Then you have a crossroads that you can hit because you can see both roads, fear and faith, and you can see where you're making the choice from. Does that make sense, everybody? Great. So let's keep going. Number 4, your inner critic. Inner critic. Inner critic is the voice, the critical voice inside of your head that says you are not blank enough. Not strong enough, you don't know enough, you're not loud enough, you haven't learned enough. You're this enough, that whatever it is. I'm a woman, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this. Don't have enough money. It's basically a voice in our head that tries to dissuade us, opposite of persuade, dissuade us from taking action. Again, that's a protection mechanism that will indicate to you like a flag, a marker in the ground that you're actually scared. Here's another big one, distraction. So I'm going to talk about distraction in a way that you might not expect me to talk about it today, but it's this, okay? It's you're going to write the article. You're going to write the book. You're going to go do the thing. And then all of a sudden, you're like, you know what? I focus so much better when my house is clean. So I'm going to just clean up really quick first so that I can feel my space feels really zen. And then once it's all really clean, then I'm going to sit down and finally do the work. You all are laughing because we've all been here, right? Like, meanwhile, your house has been a mess for 2 weeks. You've gotten everything else done that everyone else expected you to get done. But now the moment that you're going to sit down and do the one thing that actually matters, now you got to clean the house. That's fear. Disguised. Makes a lot of sense. And it picks up friends. Anybody who's read the book, The War of Art, Resistance, picks up friends. It says, you're getting ready to sit down and do the work. Your homegirl calls. You look at the phone and you go, I really should. I'll just pick it up really quick. Boop. An hour later, time's up. You're getting ready to sit down and do the thing. Oh, now you should put in your laundry while you're doing it, right? Everybody knows laundry actually does take up some attention, right? I'm just gonna put it in real quick so it can happen while I'm working. Or I'm gonna try this recipe. I should meal prep. You haven't meal prepped in 2 months. Now you're gonna meal prep, right? When you're gonna sit down and do the thing. You're laughing, right? Because we all do it. So this is when this happens to you, when you want to try the new recipe or call your aunt that you haven't called in 6 months or whatever the thing is, stop for a second and ask yourself, what am I avoiding? What am I afraid of? And then you get a moment to actually choose. This is what mindfulness gives us the space and the capacity to do. We're paying attention to what's happening in our lives. Last two, indecisiveness. Indecisiveness, massive one. I don't even need to talk about that one anymore. I'm not sure. And finally, the last one, which is my favorite, conspiracy. Conspiracy. So I'll give you this definition from Brene Brown, which I love so much around conspiracy. She says, a conspiracy is a story with limited factual data points that you fill in with your own values, ideas, and beliefs. So that sounds really nice. Let me make it very practical to you. How many of us have been in a situation at some point in our lives, maybe it's past and you have to adjust the technology that I'm talking about. When I speak to high school students and college students, they laugh at this. How many of us have been dating somebody, maybe trying to, and we're texting, and in the beginning, it's good morning and good night, and you're texting, and then one morning, you don't get the good morning text, okay? And then you got about an hour, and then you look again, still didn't get the good morning text. Then all the conspiracies start, all the stories. Well, maybe this and maybe that. And then you start looking through your old messages. Oh my God, did I say something? Going through, what did you say last night? Calling one of your friends. What is it that I said? What did I do? I'm saying this dating joke, but we can apply it to so many areas of our lives. The stories that we make up in our heads about what we think might happen once we share our voice, once we step in, once we do the work, once we show up at that organization, once we volunteer, all the stories. And so I always tell myself when I get into this conspiracy mode, and I know I'm in it, when I start calling my friends and going over all these hypothetical stories that I think are going to happen, is you ask yourself, first of all, what are the facts? What are the actual facts? In the example that I gave, the only fact is you did not get a text message. And then you say, well, what am I making up? And then you ask the big question, what am I afraid of? Is it rejection? Is it whatever it is, messing up, getting called out? And then you get to choose fear or faith. Conspiracies keep us stuck in what if. And there's no worse place to be than what if. I always say, make a move. My co-teacher in the liberation experience, her name's Shelley Tagelski, she says, don't be a what if person. There's two types of people in the world. There's the what ifs and there's a why, and then there's the why nots. She said, don't be a what if, be a why not. Why not me? Why not now? Why not see what happens and learn? So as I close, one of the things that I love to do at the end of every practice, and we'll be done in the next 3 minutes or so, is you can place your hands over your heart for a moment and close your eyes if you'd like. Take a breath in and a breath out. Now, I've taught a lot in this session, and you're not going to remember it all. So I want you to just consciously think of what is the one thing, if you could only take away one thing from this session today, what's the one thing that you want to take away? And then just think about it for a few moments. It takes between 25 and 30 seconds to commit something to the long-term memory. And then go ahead and open your eyes and write it down in the chat. And the commitment that you can make to yourself is that this is one of the things that you will try to embody. And ultimately, this is about the internal work that we all must do to make our external world show up differently. That's what this is all about. So I remember that I said I was going to play y'all a song. So if you have 5 more minutes, I'll do that. And as we close, the other thing that I promised to mention was, for those of you who want to take this further, and this is not a sales pitch by any stretch of the imagination, I'd like to give you an invitation to the Liberation Experience. It's an online program that's starting April 19th, where we bring people together across divides to not just talk about this stuff, but to actually do the work that it takes to make a change and end it. We have a model that we've created that's pretty amazing called the Infinity Model. And we start the group as one, and then we split into what we call infinity groups based upon race to do the same kind of work in different silos, but not to keep separate like affinity groups, but so that we can come back together to practice having conversations across divides. We give conversation templates. We go through forgiveness and atonement and calling forward and creating the vision for the world and all these things. And so one of the things that's really amazing is Kirsten and Lynn are going to put into the chat box the link. And I want you to use that special link, because what we're doing is, if you sign up for the program, which you have to go through and apply, if you sign up for the program, 50% of every single registration from tonight or from anybody watching this replay is going as a donation to the anti-racist table. And so I want you to use that link instead of using my link, because it's how we'll track the donations. And then finally, you'll see on the bottom of my screen, it says apply or give scholarships. All of this is run through my 501c3 nonprofit organization. And we aim to provide scholarships to every single person who needs a scholarship. And we've been able to do that thanks to generous donors. So if anybody wants to donate, even if you can't participate, you can go to that same link that Kirsten put in the chat box, and that will be in the description for the recording of this video, and make a donation to help other people participate. The program is 8 weeks long, and it's twice a week, and you can see all the details, and it's all recorded and all of that. You can see all the details on that page. So as I close, you know, I just think about, it's just so interesting. Like I'm always think back to this little dude. And, you know, never could have imagined that the healing that literally happened and continues to happen inside of this bloodline could have the opportunity for me to share with you all in hopefully a way that helps us, again, not just talk about change, but start to actually change something in our lives. And no matter how much work we do, no matter who started it, no matter who points the finger of blame, what we all have to remember is that no matter what, we rise together. We rise together. We're bound to one another. And so there's my name, my email address if you want to get in touch, my book, and hopefully I'll see some of you joining us in the Liberation Experience. So Lynn and Kirsten, thank you so much for having me. For those of you who have to get off, you can get off. If you want me to throw a song on, I can throw a song, but if you have to leave, I will. I know I went a little over time, so.
Yes, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Justin.
My computer's doing something weird. Say that again, Lynn, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, yeah, thank you. This has been amazing. And we're looking forward to the song. We definitely are gonna rise together. So,
okay, cool.
And we did have one participant who had a question about how can they call someone forward. So I don't know if that's, you know, something you can take on in a 2-minute kind of.
I can't. We go, so I'll tell you the keys, the tenets to it, and we go to this in detail in the liberation experience. This is like a multiple day conversation, but the pieces of it are that you can take right now is make sure there is no shame and blame, and you're calling them toward something instead of just talking about what, you can't just be talking about what's being done wrong. You also want to start pointing in the direction of where they should be going. It's not that you have to teach everything, or it's not that level of context. It's that there is an orientation of fighting against versus moving toward and inviting. Calling forward is an invitation into something greater that includes us all. And the last piece of it, so there's 1, 2, the third, well, there's actually several more pieces, but the third one that you can take right now is that you rarely need to try to teach someone something. You want to more share your experience. Share your story and your experience of this, less trying to show up and preach and teach and tell someone what they should be doing and knowing. So those, if you infuse those 3, you'll already be on the road to calling forward. And we do a lot more of that inside of the liberation experience as well. So
yeah, we're super excited about that liberation experience. It works really well paired with the Anti-Racist Table 30-Day Challenge. So we hope that we can call everyone forward to really step into this work and bring the change that we all need. So wonderful. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Lynn and Kirsten, if you could put the link in the chat for everybody again, I'm super grateful. And I'm just going to play this song. I recently did a live performance where we were raising money for children who lost their parents to COVID. And I released this song called Believe. It's on Spotify and anywhere that you can find music. And as you listen to this, I want you to hear it not as a performance, but as a prayer. And this song is really that infinity symbol of recognizing those that came before us, those who will come after us, those who we will be a before to, and how we can all make a change in the now. So this is Believe. And if you all can't hear it, somebody let me know because my computer's being weird. Okay. This is Believe.
Now we can't hear you. Oh, you're muted, Justin.
I don't want to believe when I got the news that you would leave, that I would never hug you. No, 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 I'm not ready. I'm not ready to let you go. I don't understand how this is part of the plan. Can you tell me why? No, 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 I'm not ready. I'm not ready to do this alone. So go ahead, dry your eyes, 'cause you were born to fly. And you will be alright. How can I believe that it was you I felt in the breeze, that you were right beside me, telling me that you're with me, watching me like an angel now. Don't worry, I'm always here in your heart, guiding you here in the dark. When you can't see me, I'm pushing you to grow stronger, pushing you to grow stronger now. I'm here. 'Cause I lift you up, I praise your name. Oh, 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 no, I trust in you, we rise again. Would you believe all this happened to me? But I'm still not broken. No, 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 they can't bring us. No, 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 they can't take us down. Didn't realize that when my whole world ended overnight, that you were right there guiding me, pushing me to grow stronger, pushing me to grow stronger now. 'Cause I would you believe? Would you believe? Would you believe? Would you believe? All this happened to me, but I'm still not broken. No, 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 they can't bring us. No, 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 they can't take us down. I didn't realize that when my whole world ended overnight, that you were right there guiding, pushing me to grow stronger. I pray that I can grow stronger now. And now all I see in these photographs of you and me is how much you love me. I just want to say thank you. I just want to say thank you now. And I believe.
Thank you all so much for having me. It's an honor, anti-racist table. And I'll see you guys somewhere else along the path.
Thank you. Thank you.
Much love, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much, Justin.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, your song was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. Bye, Reba.
We should stop the